Just hearing the term faces of death can conjure some strong images to your mind if you've seen it or not. Pictures of the dead, from the peacefully deceased to full-on videos of tragic, brutal accidents. All of these neatly sealed and compiled for you to rent at the video store for a cozy night in. This is about the most notorious gore saga of all time, Faces of Death. Faces of Death was a 1978 Mondo horror film that was released under the notion of being 100% real death footage on camera for you to watch at home. But in reality, it was almost all entirely faked, which is still a very commonly unknown fact to this day. Regardless of this, it created an absolute legacy within media and horror as a whole, spawning its own mass amount of sequels and even leading to the eventual inspiration to the creation of real-life genuine gore mixtapes, as we will be discussing today. And it even, for some reason, got mentioned in The Sopranos once, which, it just shows how much of pop culture lexicon Faces of Death truly is. So how does a Mondo faux snuff documentary movie become such a prevalent piece of media? During the early and late 60s, during the 60s. During the 60s, Western media was obsessed with what were referred to as Mondo films, this word coming from the 1962 Italian film Mondo Cane. These Mondo films consisted of footage taken from typically other subcultures that don't follow similar lifestyles, mainly the inclusions of animal slaughter in the means of feeding their community, or ritualistic practices of tribes that were edited and narrated into something that they were far from, usually in the means of depicting these cultures as brutal, violent savages. And this was something that wasn't far from new, which, we've discussed time and time again. The word cannibal truly just comes from a bunch of racist narratives that have no founding at all. And since we said one of my favorite words, cannibal, we do have to talk about how the fact, I believe, Mondo documentaries, which mainly were made by Italian filmmakers, also led to the major inspiration between the very niche early Italian cannibal films, but we're discussing that for another day. Either way, Mondo films, Mondo documentaries became a giant success. People craved violence, and not just violence, real violence. As I mentioned, a lot of it was a lot of animal slaughter or animal killing, and this translated into Faces of Death, but the real big pull of Faces of Death was the fact that this was real, genuine human death. By this time in the late 70s, people were sick of Mondo. They felt like they have seen it all. There's nothing more that can shock them. So the entire selling point of Faces of Death was that this was so extreme, so brutal, so disturbing and disgusting. It is something that the normal person could not handle. Famously marketed as showing a number of real deaths, murders, sewer slides, and executions, from human to animal, from cults to spree killers, Faces of Death promised a deep dive into all things morbid for those who couldn't get enough carnage from their fictional flicks. The Faces of Death franchise consists of 8 films, which, Jesus Christ, I also did not know what I was signing up for. But let's start at square one, because frankly, Faces of Death 1 is the only one that really matters in general, if we're very honest. But either way, this is a mockumentary style film where we have our narrator, Francis Gross. Really? Who is a pathologist who is obsessed or infatuated with the transition between life and death. And even before we're introduced to Francis, the film opens with real footage of an open heart surgery. And yes, before I get into it, as much as the majority of Faces of Death is fake, there are real clips, as I'm going to discuss with you, of things of this nature. And as always, use discretion when looking at anything I talk to you about, especially today. Anything today, be very careful looking at things. Use your best judgment, okay? Initially, the plan for the movies were to be true, unaltered, completely genuine footage of people dying. But soon enough, when the 2 creators and the editor and the investors all saw this, they all kind of were like, this isn't good. You know what I mean? This isn't something that is captivating to an audience. People need storylines. They need plot. They need something, or at least this was horrible foreshadowing to the eventual existence of gore mixtapes or compilations, whatever you want to call it. And gonna tell you right now, very unfortunate mention of MDPOPE at the end of this video, so if that's the hook to make you finish, you're welcome. Jesus Christ, finish the video. It's 3 in the morning. Finish the video. Finish the video. So they quickly realized, oh, we kind of got to make a storyline happening. We can't just show clips of people dying in war. So the ending footage of Faces of Death is kind of just a mishmash of violence. From slaughterhouse footage of the PETA variety, which I will say because I'm a little research freak, this is a specific slaughterhouse in Southern California, which still exists to this day, and most of what was filmed in Southern California. Fake dogfights, historical footage of Holocaust victims, news clips of SWAT shootouts, and of what I know you freaks are more interested in, there's even a whole fake tribal weird cannibalism sequence, which someone who watches this channel says their friend was one of the kids in this, which is insane. But like every movie ever, there's one scene that sticks out in particular, and for Faces of Death 1, it is a monkey brain dinner scene, a la Indiana Jones, but like in the most horrible and cruel way possible. In this sequence, there are a bunch of people around dinner tables, and there's a monkey, and they have hammers. And then eventually we see them eating the brains of the monkey. Now, I'm gonna tell you right now before we move on, completely fake. So insanely fake. They use an actor monkey and fake like foam hammers, and then, you know, nice little editing. And the monkey brains were actually cold cauliflower and theater blood. Yum. This scene is so like infamous that the creator of the film, he's even himself said people will argue with him that it's real, and he tells them it isn't, like, I made this, it's not real, but people will swear until their face is blue that this is a real scene, and it just absolutely isn't. Outside of these staged things, it is just horrifically sad footage of disasters and accidents, and it's just fucking horrible. And of course, with that, I'm sure you wouldn't be surprised to hear this was a underground box office success, getting 35 million in the first week, apparently. And of course, these were being shown in Grindhouse cinemas. These were not being shown at the old AMC. And with this success came criticism and people speaking about it. And if you've heard me ever talk about horror, you know there is no better PR for a horror movie than bad PR. The second you label a horror movie as disgusting, depraved, or that needs to be removed, you're doubling the sales. Horror gore nuts love nothing more than what's too extreme. One of the major selling points of the VHS was it being labeled as banned in over 40 countries. And of course, this led to it being labeled and grouped into the infamous UK's banning of video nasties, which, if you're unfamiliar, during the UK under the reign of a certain prime minister, they started a whole genre of films called video nasties, which were banned in the UK. This included things like Evil Dead, I Spit on Your Grave, and in this case, of course, Faces of Death, which, shameless plug, Halloween merch is only available till October 31st, and it is video nasty merch, so go check that out. Now, outside of the monkey brain scene and the cannibals, how much of this movie was really faked, you're probably asking. Outside of the usage of historical footage, not a single real death is on screen. Which I guarantee you at least one person is going to come into the comments and argue about it. But I'm telling you right now, outside of historical footage or archival footage, no one dies on screen in Faces of Death. But the caveat to that is, there is absolutely footage of real corpses. Not the act of dying, but the aftermath of death. Including us, the viewer, being led through the embalming process by a man who was actually involved in the autopsies of Sharon Tate and Marilyn Monroe. And even them recutting the entire film after it was already completed, just months before release, to include footage from the Flight 182 catastrophe of a fatal collision in air. And even crazier, while they were filming other things on Sunset Beach, a body had washed ashore and someone ran up and told them about it, so they took footage of a man who died while swimming intoxicated a few days before. I cannot get clarification if the guy who went up and told them knew what they were filming, or they just ran up and were like, there's a dead person, and they were like, grab the boom, Mike. And when you place reality with fiction so intertwined with no distinction between the two, there's nothing for your brain to do but take it all as reality, especially with the entire branding of it being that everything that's shown to you is real. With $450,000 given by Japanese investors to the two creators and hours of research mixed with clever editing and staging. They tricked most of the nation into thinking they were watching people being killed on screen. Along with this 70s grain quality of camera work, people were none the wiser, especially after a decade of consuming real Mondo documentaries that with their editing crafted true horror stories, where in all reality they were splicing and sampling like a reality TV show to push a narrative. In the Mondo case, it was pushing the narrative of these people being savages and brutes, and in Faces of Death, it was the narrative that you were seeing true, real death. And at the end of the day, neither were truly true in the end. And of course, with this making like 50 times their budget, I don't know, I'm not good at math, but like of course they made sequels, and Faces of Death 2 very clearly feels like a forced sequel. Like, it feels like a scramble. It is odd and slow and odd. But the creator himself says, with this being funded by Japanese producers, they assumed this movie was to go overseas and they would never hear about it or see about it again. So for this to become literally a box office success and now immediately a notorious movie, they had to rush to get this done, and it's so rushed. The first film has these large action-filled reenactment scenes, whereas the sequel contains a lot of disaster B footage and a very odd amount of the boxing fight between Lupe Pintor and Johnny Owen, which the injuries Johnny sustained during this fight would end up taking his life shortly after he left the ring. It's a clear scramble and chase to try to just reach the end time they needed for this movie. As Faces of Death was now notorious, death itself, within Western culture, more particularly the United States, had become disjointed and beyond self-relation, almost hidden, creating this level of taboo within it, which creates such a complex relation of quite literally an inevitable occurrence. Death had become constructed into a pure enigma, something that isn't really socially acceptable to discuss at length or detail, yet it is something that will happen to everyone no matter what. There are only two experiences in your life that you will have happen, no matter how much you want or don't want them to happen. Your birth and your death. It's also what makes us all the same. It's what makes us human. Yet there is now this fear that is latched upon it by societal pressures and normalities that now has created this giant push and intrigue in your mind because you know it's something you're not supposed to look at. Which there's no better selling point in the entire world than curiosity. Humans are curious creatures by nature. And of course, you can ignore that entire big brain thing, and you can just say it's the continuation of violent media being shown to the masses, and frankly, you wouldn't be wrong with that thought process either. As I touched on, we had the entire Mondo film section of just this push of reality, real violence, more brutal, more intense, more everything, more excess. Now, it didn't matter how kind of disjointed Faces of Death 2 was, it's a straight-to-video release, and so are all the subsequent movies. Faces of Death 3 is seemingly beloved by enjoyers of the franchise. It does go back to the original first one of doing these large-scale reenactments, and it's very interesting, because I feel like 3 kind of embraces the fact that it isn't real, because they do like these large, like almost crime show reenactments of like getting bodies out of I think it's a serial killer's house, and like even a whole like staged courtroom sequence. We'll say once again, this is spliced in between real archival and historical footage of genuine death, and it's very interesting and kind of bizarre. Because there's chunks of it where you're just like, oh yeah, whatever, and then you're once again slammed in the face with true genuine death of people. It's very odd. And then this kind of vibe follows into 4, but from what I can tell, people don't really like 4 as much, which I don't know. It's just so weird. This stuff's it's just such a fantastical concept to be like, okay, we're gonna do like these big, really dramatic fake bits, but then like just put like car accidents in between, because that's like essentially what it is. 4, they have someone like pretend to jump off a building. Someone does like a magic trick and gets hurt. I don't know. Guys, I'm gonna be so real. I don't know. It's so bizarro. I don't know. These movies are so bizarre to me because of the concept of like fiction and reality being blended so heavily. And like, here's the thing, it's now 2025. Like, these are very obviously fake. Like, if you watch them, I feel like you will go into and be like, oh, how did anyone believe this? But like there are people to this day that swear these movies are real. And then the rest of the films are just compilations of the previous ones. I believe these were for release in countries that the original ones were banned in. So, was it 5, 6, and 7? I think 7's even called, like, the worst of Faces of Death. And they're just compilations of the movies, which, who cares? And here is the thing about the horror legacy or influence of Faces of Death. It is the fact that without Faces of Death and the soon following film Cannibal Holocaust, again, both Italian films, which, honestly, so much of horror we have to give to Italian cinema, but, without these movies, it is questionable about what found footage would look like. Faces of Death, being a mockumentary-style film, still, the transitional periods between our narrator camera lens into the actual lens of tragedy, it gives this, like, early found footage-esque energy, and without these both horrifically, morally, ethically unaligned films, it is an interesting concept of, like, what would horror look like without these? Part of the magic of movies is creating this reality within fiction, and Faces of Death did exactly that. They do it in the most morally, unaligned, and unethical means, absolutely. But that was always their intention. It was always to make the most disturbing, the most extreme, the most horrid thing they could make. And of course, the biggest and honestly the only issue, the giant issue within Faces of Death is the context of using these historical and archival footage of real genuine death. And soon enough, we would be introduced to something so much worse. In 1993, Traces of Death would be released to the public. This would be the end-all, be-all of real, genuine death on film. This was no fake cannibal tribes or bogus cauliflower monkey dinners. This was the real death of people for your enjoyment. Opening with our narrator of this season, Damon Fox, who wrote, produced, and directed, and narrated this entire movie. Welcome. You're about to enter a realm of the unimaginable. We're then told about what we are going to see while pictures of cadavers flash onto the screen. And we're pulled immediately into a film of death. Gunshot victims, sewer slides, crime scenes, video footage of police shootouts. And there's this, like, really odd, off-putting, unsettling, like, electronic music just underscoring with these, like, very dark, gritty, Nightcrawler-esque car accident footage. And it, like, adds this weird extra level of, like, anxiety and grime and, like, horror of, like, it feels like we're just seeing something we're not supposed to be seeing, because guess what? We absolutely are. But the soundtrack to this is so, like, just creepy. It's just creepy. And there is, of course, the human death and violence, and of course the continuation of animal violence, but there is a scene in this movie that is absolutely so horrific. I watched this movie once when I was in high school, and this is, like, still burned in my head. And this is footage of a pig being burned alive with a blowtorch. I've looked into it. The footage comes from a military science experiment. That's as much as I can get out of. It actually comes from a different mixtape called True Gore. And, like, beyond, I'm just like, what science experiment are you doing where you're like, oh, let's blowtorch a live pig? The sounds of this, it's so fucking horrific. Like, guys, it's so bad. Like, I know a bunch of you are gonna go and watch these because I'm talking about that, but, like, I'm genuinely, like, don't, there's nothing good to come out of watching this. And whereas in Faces of Death, we essentially have Francis Gross telling us stories and, like, trailing us down, Traces of Death is kind of really just, like, it is more of a pure just violence compilation with little narration sprinkled throughout, which, once again, foreshadowing to the current standing of Gore mixtapes. And as for the other footage outside of this science experiment, if you're pondering how people got this footage, because that's usually a big thing around this, it's similar to what I talked about in the Alarma video, is there has always been documentators of death, either on purpose or not on purpose. Either people at the so-called right place at the so-called right time, taking pictures or filming, or people who do, in fact, seek it out. And these individuals then take this and sell it, because there's a market for it. Either private, news, public, personal collection, like, there is always someone who is somehow getting a picture or a video of death, and there is more than enough ways to distribute said things, and that is how things end up in stuff like this. As well, similar to Faces of Death, and I feel like almost every shockumentary, Mondo, whatever the hell we're talking about, they all contain autopsy footage. Like, that is like a staple, is to include that. So of course there's some of that. And something I find very, very interesting, because this movie was put out in 1993, is they show the surgical operation of a male to female bottom surgery. And of course this was used for, you know, gross, shock out, crazy factor, like super, you know, gross and sensitive, yada yada. I just, for the timing of it, I find it very interesting that they acquired this and put it into it. And of course, Traces of Death, similar to Faces of Death, immediate underground success. People ate this up. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Sequels. Yes, that's right, sequels. And the big reason I want to talk about the sequels is because, unlike Faces of Death, Traces of Death kind of really 180s its entire, like, layout of film from the following sequels. As I mentioned, there wasn't much narration, and when there was, it was more of the serious, dark, sinister tone, whereas Traces of Death 2 and onward, the narrator starts relishing the death, starts, like, comically laughing, and even overtly mocking the dead in what is being shown. And as I mentioned, that, like, weird phantasm-esque electronic music that was in the first one has been replaced with ripping, brutal death metal. There is, like, crazy solos and gutturals now undertone to all of the footage, which becomes a staple of this franchise to, like, such an insane degree. Beyond that, it is very much the same format of, you know, accidents, sewer slides, car crashes. I will say, Traces of Death 2, once again has bottom surgery, but it is female to male, which I want to say at this time was a much rarer procedure, and I don't even think many people might have known that was something that was possible. And I'm just very intrigued that these ended up in Traces of Death. And going to Traces of Death 3, which, again, it's the same Gore comp. There is quite literally no reason for us to talk about it other than the fact that Traces of Death 3, the entire soundtrack is from Relapse Records. Like, arguably, like, one of the best fucking record companies, Relapse. And it has tracks from, you know, one of my favorite bands in the whole fucking world, Mortician. Even a song called Traces of Death by Mortician. There is a Pungent Stench song, which, you know, I mentioned them in the entanglement between metal and gore video. There's even a Meshuggah song. That one kind of threw me for a loop. But this is once again a pure point and focal piece of the absolute entanglement between metal and gore. The way these two are so intertwined with each other is just, it is insane. You will always find a way to connect the two, and this is just such an important piece of that. Beyond the soundtracks, these just become pretty cut and paste films of pure death, depravity, and violence. Tribal practices, massacre footage, animal torture, surgical operations, infection, and disease. Just gore for gore's sakes, which is the basis of these films. I will say, as a body modder, 3 and onward gets, like, weird with a lot of, like, body modification inclusions, including, you know, adult piercings, and even just later on, like, a really long segment about just, like, hook suspension and just, like, heavily tattooed people and surgical mods. And I find it, once again, just kind of bizarre to put this in between, like, footage of people being murdered. Of course, maybe I'm biased, but again, it's always just so interesting what they choose. And I think this is part of the whole push of the fact that it's a documentary when, you know, it isn't. This is just a mixtape. So I think including stuff like this helps them push that, like, kind of narrative that we're documenting subversive things. But with things like Bizarre Magazine and the now cyberspace of gore, the Traces of Death kind of just died out in the 2000s. Because why would you sit and watch a compilation when you can go on Rotten or Ogrish and make your own compilation at home? You can watch what you want to watch and not have to watch what someone else curated for you. Since we're talking about these spin-off or inspired runoff films from Faces of Death, I think I have to mention Faces of Gore, which is by far the most disgusting, offensive, brutish one of the bunch. Which might sound insane to you. You might be like, oh, this is you're singling one out as being horrible and bad. Yeah, this one is. And on top of that, so insanely misogynistic, like, it's baffling. And what I mean by that, if you're already, like, rolling your eyes at Darby, is that there is footage of people who died during a train wreck. And we see very brutal up-close footage of a deceased pregnant woman who became burned to the point her fetus is exposed. And for some reason, the narrator just goes on a weird tirade about unmarried women, and then relishes in the fact that this is 2 faces of gore for the price of 1. And if you're like, oh, whatever, weird political tirade, later on, there is a whole chunk of the movie that's dedicated to sewer slides, which I know, guys, okay, I have now learned through the system, I can't say it to you, please give me some grace with how much of the real shit I say to you, please, but there's a section of that. Medics are, cutting the clothes off of a woman that had strung herself. I'm sorry, I hate doing that stuff. A woman that had done that, and, they're cutting her clothes off for whatever medical reasons they have to do, protocol, who knows. The narrator begins to make piggish, disgusting comments about this deceased woman's body, all the way up until trying to guess her bra size. I believe this is meant to be comical. Of course, it comes across as nothing of the sort. And to top it off, they try to do a similar segment that was in a Faces of Death of having an interview with a real hitman. In this case, they have an interview with a real Japanese hitman, and the over subtitles that are supposed to be what he's saying is just like really offensive, broken English. So on top of this just being, a disgusting gore compilation, the narrator decides to be just the worst guy you could ever know. And on that whole, following the entire Faces of Death formula and talk about the narrator for this one is, I'm gonna read it off of my notes because it's that corny and insane. It is Dr. Vincent Van Gore, who is a specialist of death phenomena at the Institute of Goreology. I hate it here. Now, with Faces of Gore, the focus was gore, whereas Traces of Death, the focus was death. So with that, this is almost all footage of people post-mortem. This is more about deceased individuals than death like our other franchises. And the interesting part about this, and one of the reasons I did want to bring it up on top of it just being horrible, was the fact that this one is as well. It's labeled to be a genuine, real footage film. This is supposed to be like Traces of Death. But there's some weird stuff that I don't think lines up at all. Particularly, the beginning disclaimer says that the footage is real, but names and scenarios have been changed. And even more so, at the very end of the film, credits state that characters and events in the film are entirely fictional. For total transparency with you, I spent some time trying to find what I could about this. I can't find clarification on if all of it's fake, all of it's real, mix of both. Between all of the films we've talked about today, I'm gonna guess some of it's fake, some of it's real. That's kind of all I can come up with, because it really is just like, who fucking knows? This one is the hardest one to find anything about for some particular reason. And since we're, God, I don't even know. I don't even know how to transition to this. I don't know how to transition to this, but it feels important to transition to this. From this, who knows what's real or what's not real, let's transition into the very real world of true, genuine gore films, more commonly referred to on online communities as mixtapes, i.e. compilation videos of gore, torture, death, beheadings, everything of the like. There is one that I think has become arguably the most notorious one, And that is the mixtape referred to as MDPOPE. MDPOPE is an acronym for the most disturbed person on planet Earth. And rather than a movie, it is a collage death presented as a gauntlet of gore, intermixed with various adult film clips. Almost half of the film is just that, and this ranges from very well-known online clips of that variety, like the octopus one, the eels one, a lot of two girls one, you know, like there's so much of that is included in it. It is literally like half of the film is just shock adult things of that nature. There's no story, there's no plot, there's no narrator, there's no, like, there's nothing but slamming you back to back with visualities of just pure vulgarity. This, of course, has done nothing but gain infamy, spreading in the subsets of forums and lists of the most extreme. Past its cult fandom, it's become a bit of an internet dare. Its existence is the pre-built empire of craving of excess, but objectively, this is just one of many of the same gore mixtapes or compilations, or however you want to label them. People using the same clips of beheadings, torture, anything that they think would churn your stomach or have someone look away. So why have I chosen this one in particular to discuss with you? That is because of the mass spread of it due to being placed onto a disturbing movie iceberg. When in all reality, the bottom chunk of this movie iceberg is just gore mixtapes, which movies are fiction. The virtual vulgarity of transcribing the depravity of man to film for the enjoyment and consumption of the underground masses is not a movie. But this iceberg just completely blew up online, and so many people just went down this list, just being like, oh yeah, whatever, so extreme, until they come face to face with screwdriver self-impalement downstairs, or literal dead children in war zones. It's now gained this cyber glory and infamy within mostly groups of literal children. Because who else is really more of the time sitting here and looking at, ooh, what's more extreme, what's worse, who's running gauntlets? Children on the internet. That's literally who it is set up for. And this mass spread of this disturbing iceberg has now led to a new wave of gore hounds. And outside of this problematic spread of real death, I also bring this one up because of the man who made it. Thomas, the self-proclaimed most disturbed person on planet Earth. After seemingly feeling ripped off by other mixtapes in a means of proving himself in his work, most particularly this is surrounding the alleged existence of the film Snuff R73, which that has its own weird BS garbage gore cesspool of fucking degenerates that I do not care to get into, but Thomas got his hands on it, and he realized like 80% of it was literally just ripped from his film or compilation or mixtape MDPOPE, so he obviously felt a type of way about this and felt like he had to one-up. He had to prove himself, improve his tapes. And he chose to do this with MDPOPE 2, the original trailer or whatever, containing the audio of one of the most infamous, horrific, hardcore CSAM videos ever made known to the general public, as I have discussed in my Snuff in Red Rooms video, and that is Daisy's Destruction. And he used the audio from it, and he himself confirmed it was the audio from it, proving, and even himself saying, that he has access. He has access to that film. And, you know, he, like, made some of his little Facebook posts about, that it's, you know, to F censorship. Isn't that nice? And, there is rumors, again, heavy on the rumors, as the original cut of MDPOPE 2 ended with the entirety of said video, and that he was, urged by, the people he, like, community showed it to remove it and stuff, and, that's all rumor. It is a matter of fact. He had access to, at the bare minimum, the audio of that video. I just really hate being here sometimes. And after pressure from the people he showed it to, he removed the audio of said clip, and MDPOPE 2 was released into the world with a 3-hour runtime, doubling the original one. They made a third one. I think they even made 5 of them. And frankly, who gives a fuck? And again, this is just one of hundreds, if not thousands, of mixtapes of Clearnet content. I want to stress that to you so badly every time I talk about this stuff with you. This is not a dark web, snuff room, red room, urban legends, scary, secret, internet, guys in masks things. This is on the Clearnet. MDPOPE 1 consists purely of videos you can find right now with about 3 clicks. This is all stuff readily accessible to whoever clicks whatever link online. This is Clearnet, okay? This is where you're at right now. Frankly, some of this is at the platform you're at right now. Gore focuses on the fragility of the human form. It thrives on the vulnerability of our minds and our bodies. Faces of Death stands as a legacy of the human mind's craving for the macabre and its unavoidable consequences of our mortality, forcing us to face it on paper. But in all reality, I think this does nothing but create the further separation. When we are shown clips of those in the Middle East, they are referred to as these or those people by our narrator. A clear level of separation, or even just the simple reference to this man. No name, no age, no nothing. Whereas they create this air of reality with the splicing of footage real and not. They also create a fictitious environment in the reality of it. The fact of not putting the bare bones of humanity onto an individual were shown. Yes, you say, I saw someone get cannibalized. That's it. That's where the thought ends. Someone. No thought of who exactly. This draws comparison within the Faces of Gore, where the narrator has taken the step further of dehumanization of the individuals to overtly mock them. And this is directly in line with the behavior of Gore communities. And this is something I talked about very extensively in the Shock Site video, is they will create value of life. It will quickly become hierarchical of who is worthy of mockery and who is not. From environment to appearance and what details they have in front of them. When videos occur in the Middle East of violence, it is a matter of fact to the viewer that this is life there, and they almost see no qualms in it, even labeling it boring, or that those individuals should know this would happen, blaming them for their unfair deaths, as it's so common there. Or if they have specific details of individuals, say they're gay, they'll throw slurs. When it's suicides, they'll say that this is the best thing they could have done and what a loser they are. And in these films, even with these being depictions of real human death, torture, and suffering, it's become fictitious in the sense of the removal of humanity and life, and identity of those on film. They've now become the woman I saw hit by a car. And it's pushed even further with the narrator. We have a live person speaking to us through the lens, directly, as I speak to you now, alive. They're gonna come away from the movie with him. We know his name. We spoke to him. He spoke to us, even. He led us through this entire thing. He is the reality of the film, even though Francis Gross is no pathologist and isn't even Francis Gross. He is who we will take away from this as a person. These were people with a life like you. A consciousness, a dream, a family, a friend, and anything. And the transformation of their life exists only now to people by their death. A catalyst to the creation of real-life horror compilations and an ever-present representation of the craving of voyeurism and, frankly, the self-satisfaction of indulging in death from what can be deemed safely. The opening to Faces of Death is as follows. In one brief moment, within the span of a heartbeat, your world could stop. There is no way to predict when you will become one of them. For the first time in cinema history, the greatest fear of all mankind will be graphically exposed. Now a motion picture dares to take you beyond the threshold of the living, where you may discover your own face of death. This allows you to confront your own mortality in a digestible way, or at least in a form of separation. An insane act of privilege, one could argue, to be the most overindulging, self-satisfying act man can take. Harping back to the tagline of the film Snuff, where life is cheap, it creates a distinction between life and its value and where that holds, by a person to their location. But the second we cheapen life and put price tags on it, what even is death? And who are you to face it? As always, honor the dead, try to respect the living. That is all I can ever ask of you. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. Have you seen Faces of Death? Have you heard about Faces of Death? Have you seen or heard about any of these movies at all? I think, once again, Faces of Death has become, like, a weird point in horror history, and it's weird, it's enigmatic, because it's just, like, it's so much of it is fake, but there is reality in it, and that causes its own issues, and, you know, just let me know how you feel about anything and everything we talked about today. I said Halloween merch, it's only available till the 31st, make sure you get that. That is the dog, for everyone that's gonna be like, is that the dog? Yeah, it's the dog, he's sleeping. Make sure you're following me on everything. I am Darby Valentine on literally everything. Instagram and TikTok are where I'm most active. I also have Letterboxd and Twitter. I think that sounds right. I'm on all those platforms. Follow me there. As always, once again, just thanks for being here. Thanks for being a friend. I appreciate everyone who always checks in on me when I talk about topics like this. Promise you guys, I'm okay, okay? Like, I kind of vent to you guys a little bit in the video. Like, I am good. Fear not. Don't worry about Darby. But, as always, once again, thanks for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Make sure to do all three. Make sure to hit the notification bell. Oh, make sure to hype this video. If you have the hype button, hype me up, baby. Alright, and if you like this video, I think, without a doubt, you'd probably like my video about deep dive into shock sites. And, with that, we'll see you next time. I'm Darby Valentine. Bye!